That was just a bit of mood setting, ladies and gentlemen. I won't be singing or won't be playing too much guitar. Let me ask you a question. Which destination would you rather prefer? Prisons, mental asylums, or death? We all know, or most people in the audience, whoever's going to be watching videos, we all know drug addicts in the form of colleagues, mostly friends, a lot of the times our family members, parents, children. For me, it was a first-hand story. I grew up in a perfect family of four. My father was a businessman, my mom, a college professor. My brother, who's in the audience, 3 years older than me, my brother and I, we used to go to school together. We used to walk to school. And we'd have like winter vacations, summer vacations, we'd go abroad, sometimes to our ancestral homes. And on weekends, we'd rent movies together. It was the early 90s, and we'd watch movies, the four of us together. My father would travel a lot. This all changed when my father got killed in a shooting incident. And right after that, it seemed that I just couldn't get it right anymore. I started doing really badly in my studies. I flunked on my 7th grade. I flunked on my 9th grade. I did really badly on my O-levels. And I was always really inclined towards music, and I naturally started gravitating towards musicians. And it was sort of like accepted, and it was sort of an initiation that if you're a musician, you start off by smoking weed. And the friends that I was hanging out with, they were sort of like bona fide, or at least known drug users, or like celebrated drug users in our community. And so it was really all right. At the age of 11, I started smoking cigarettes, and I was doing it because my best friend at that point in time, he was doing the same thing. I was just 11. I didn't know what I was doing. The addiction to nicotine came much later. At the age of 15, that's when I started experimenting with weed. As I had mentioned, that my friends that were in music and a few older friends, they were smoking weed at the same time. Just before I turned 17, at the age of 16, I came across heroin. And it didn't take me too long to get addicted to heroin. And just within a couple of months, I was a full-blown heroin addict. So at that age, when people are supposed to be, I had really low self-esteem. I never really excelled in sports. At that point in time, I wasn't doing any music or any studies. I really did not have any sort of identity. I didn't have any, when I looked at, if I asked myself what I was good at, the only thing I would identify at that point in time, even now, at that point in time, I identify as an addict, and now I identify as more than anything else as a drug addict in recovery. So that kept going on for a while, and I kept using drugs, and no one in my family knew. Some of my friends who had my older friends from childhood, they slowly started moving away. And they kept saying that, Samir, you are like really messing up. And I just didn't know. I mean, I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to approach my single mother. And I didn't know how else to, like, I was mostly using with the rest of my friends. So I didn't know how else to get out. And I really didn't know that was that big a problem. At the age of 18, when I started mixing other drugs up, things started getting really, really, really bad. Problems with authorities, problems with just not coming back home, bashing up cars, and stuff like that. When I was 18, from 18 onwards, I kept on going to multiple rehabs and institutions. And finally, at the age of 20, I feel I'm really privileged, and I was lucky enough to go to this beautiful institution in India, and that's where my recovery started. So when I went to India, my mom, who's a superwoman, but was distressed nonetheless, had to take me through customs, and my arms and feet were infected. And I was more than 20 kilos underweight, and I was using drugs at the airports, in the toilets, even on the aircraft. So just to give you a kind of the scenario, I'd like taken drugs abroad, not just because I was really dependent on it, and I was really, 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 really desperate. So here I was. I didn't really go into rehab or into recovery thinking that I was going to make it. I had lost all confidence. I had tried it a couple of times. And I really had no faith in myself, let alone recovery or getting clean. So here I was, a 20-year-old, can't say a man, I still don't feel like a boy, and just trying to figure out what I'd done. I always felt that I'd let my mother down because she's been a single parent for the longest time. And this process, it turned out to be the most beautiful journey that I've ever gone through. So a little bit about drugs and drug addicts. If you or anyone else is struggling with drugs, and if you decide today, if there's anyone in the audience, or if you expect someone to, if they're a true addict like I was, if you decide that you're on drugs, you're on hard drugs, and you decide that I'm gonna quit today, and that's it, I'm not gonna do anything else about it, I'm not gonna make any other changes, chances are things won't really work out. And even if you manage that amount of clean time, a few days, weeks, months, maybe even a year, you'll probably start going insane. So there has to be this psychic, this spiritual shift, and a lot of other things that you need to. I like to think, or the recovery circles, there's a large, massive community worldwide of recovering drug addicts. And we like to think that it's a disease. That's where I find my comfort. And it's not the worst disease that you can have. It's a disease where you don't have any absolute or necessary cure, but it's a disease where you can find a massive community where you can work with each other. We like to think that we have a void in our spirit, we have a void in our soul. And the reason people like us, we get addicted to drugs is because of that void, and sort of that void gets filled up with drugs. And that process that I was introduced to, it was a 15-month process. It took me 15 months, or it took the rehab or the doctor 15 months to rewire my brain. And essentially what we did is, junkies behave in a certain way, or they have no routine. For me, I'm not ashamed to say it, a lot of people do it. I stole, I dealt drugs, and I cheated, I lied. I did a lot of things to get money to score drugs. In extreme cases, if you're using drugs or whoever's using drugs, in extreme cases, people are involved with other criminal activities such as trafficking, a lot of the times murder. And so there I was in rehab, and this beautiful process, they took us through it, and the routine of it was waking up in the morning and just slowly working on your self-esteem, just shifting things around. I grew up thinking, I always tried alternate methods in life. I'd be like, if there was an exam, I wouldn't study for it. I'd get my friends to study for a bit. I'd try to study a bit of it. And we all know the results. I flunked on 7th grade and 9th grade and messed up my O-levels. So that stuff didn't work out. And what rehab or recovery essentially did is it started sort of reintegrating me into society, how 6 billion others think. And the process turned out to be, I keep repeating it, turned out to be the most beautiful thing ever. And on the 4th or 5th month of recovery, when I was sitting there, when I didn't have any drugs on me or on money on me, and at that point in time, I had this small little, this epiphany, and it lasted for 4 or 5 seconds, and I realized that this is the feeling that I was going after. This is what I wanted. It's called chasing the dragons. A lot of the times drugs is compared to chasing a dragon. It doesn't exist, but you're just looking for that pleasure. You're looking for that high. And that lasted and I'm not saying that it just came 1 second that I woke up in the morning and it was there that I want to quit drugs. It took a lot of effort. And it's been 11 years for me now, 11 years of clean time, which means there hasn't been any shooting, popping, snorting, and drinking, and any mood or mind-altering substances. And I'm not, don't get mad at me, because I don't drink. I'm not asking anyone else to stop drinking, and I wouldn't ask anyone else to stop using drugs. For people like us who enjoy or drinking on the weekends, or have a little bit of fun, and then they wake up on weekdays and go to work, it's fine. For people like me who just can't, they become obsessive and compulsive about the drug use, they can't think of anything else. I'd wake up in the morning, the only thing that I'll think about is where am I gonna get my money? How am I gonna steal it from my mother? Or how am I gonna sell some drugs to someone else, to a friend, make a bit of profit out of that? That's the only thing. So that's how a drug addict thinks when he's on drugs. He's like obsessive. His brain is on constant loop. So those are the people I'm talking about. Abstinence is the kind of recovery that has worked for me. I guess there are hundreds and thousands of ways. I have become very spiritual. I have picked up meditation. A lot of the things that worked for me in recovery was my doctor, God bless that man, he encouraged me to pursue music, and there were a bunch of musicians around me, and we'd go around, he'd even let us go and have recording sessions, and he encouraged me to go and study music production, and later on I started like different variations of music, one after the other. Another thing that really worked for my recovery was workout, yoga, fitness, like I mentioned, meditation. But I've been doing all of these things, but one of the things that keeps me rooted, because addiction, as we consider it a disease, it crops up. I necessarily don't have to use drugs. I don't necessarily have to use heroin anymore to feel like an addict. It's really real. I can feel the disease. It crops up in the form of depression. It crops up in the form of, like, I'm quite neurotic. I start thinking of things that don't exist a lot of the times. And the only way I keep those things, those demons at bay, is by keeping this process of recovery alive. I try to talk to people. I try to speak to newcomers. And at the same time, I help my recovery by speaking there. Like, I have lots of people who dedicate their time towards my recovery. And the only way of me giving it back is by reaching out to newcomers. And it's the most giving and the most... I'm just running out of adjectives. Beautiful, beautiful process of that I have experienced in life. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. And there was a point in time, just before I went to my final treatment center. I was 19. I was stuck in rehab. I don't know for the umpteenth time, and I was just sitting there, and I literally prayed to God that, God, give me a lot of money so that I can use a lot of drugs, and then give me sobriety. And all those wishes, those prayers came true. And a few of the things that I've picked up in recovery is, first, admitting that you have a drug problem. That's one of the hardest things to do for a lot of people. That a lot of people with drug problems or drinking issues, they think, oh, I can control it. I've not done it for a month. And then they use it, and boom, they're back on it again. It's just like, it's easy if you compare it to a diabetic. I mean, if I'm just like a very good diabetic. I have an allergy with drugs, and I never use it. So stuff like that. Admitting that you have a problem with drugs, and then you probably won't be able to help yourself. You probably won't be able to do it alone. So you go reach out to a higher power in the form of meditation or prayer, whatever higher power you believe in. And then you find yourself a community. And these people are on the same journey as you, and the most beautiful people ever. And these people are coming off drugs, and they've had the same experiences. They've done all the things that you have done. They've cheated, they've stolen, they've dealt drugs. Another process that works, that I do every day, and that is sharing constantly, honestly, all your demons, and it's really painful. All those tiny little things that you're ashamed about, you share about those things. You don't necessarily need to share it with like one particular person, but you pick out 2 or 3 people in your life, and then you share it with them. Like, make sure that whatever you have inside you, you let it out, at least to like a couple of people, not just, it doesn't have to be one particular person. I'm gonna wrap up. My life, I have to say, it's still like kind of like a movie, and it was like a movie with like drugs and friends and cops and getting beaten up by cops and rehabs and stuff like that. But it has been much more exciting after that. I have traveled around, and I've traveled, and I went and studied abroad, and I'm lucky enough that I got to study music, and I'm living abroad again. And this was all a distant dream. At this point in time, I am a friend, I'm a brother, I'm a son, but I hope to be someone who's feeling hopeless at the moment. I want that person to be hopeful. And I can assure you, if I can do it, and I see hundreds and hundreds of people around me doing it the way I am, 10 years clean, 20 years clean. I've met people who are 40 years clean, who've not had a drink or have not had a hit of drug in 40 years, and so can anyone else. Thank you very much.